Hello, friends. Welcome back to Flying Casual. This is our formal book club, Holly's Hyperspace Happy Hour. Holly, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I said that I wouldn't tell anybody this, but now I decided that I'll just be transparent and tell everyone.
Ooh,
I started and finished our book club book
yeah,
today.
yeah.
So it's very fresh in my mind.
Is that something to brag about when you're running a book club that you read the book the day of the club meeting?
Depends on who you ask. But um
So Holly, I'm going to disclose, I'm going to give a disclaimer here. I'm not really the host, but I just do the introduction for the host, right?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's like a Price is Right kind of thing we got going on here. But I, in fact, did not read this novel, though I'm pretty sad that I didn't, because it sounds like it was a really great read.
Yeah, the book that we read this month was The Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover. And I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell you guys what I thought first, and then we'll see what everyone else thought.
Yeah.
Michael, I will not ask you what you thought.
I'll offer some insight as always.
No.
Oh, okay. I'll mute myself now.
I thought the book started out really slow. That's just me. I think for the first half of it, it was a lot of lightsaber battles and it was action packed in a way that didn't necessarily capture my attention. But as we got into the second half of the book, it really got into, the seduction to the dark side that Anakin went through. And I just found all of that very fascinating. So I felt like it started out as a slow read, but then it really piqued my interest.
Well, I do recall asking you after your first 50 pages, I said, how's it going? And you said, and I quote, effing terrible. So I was like, oh, this really isn't off to a great start. Is book club being canceled? I really don't know how that goes. But Holly, we do have a beautiful panel with us tonight. We've got Rob, Nettie, Jory, and Dugan here. At some point, Luke may just appear in the book club, so we'll see where he lands. I'm sure he'll land perfectly. Holly's just about to, she's pressing buttons on the screen. I really don't like when Holly does that. She may end the Skype call that we have here with our guest panelists. But Holly, should we go around the table and see what the fellas thought?
Yeah, let's do that. So let's just get your guys' general thoughts on the book, like you just heard mine. But we'll start with Dugan. I know you've been doing some traveling, but you brought your book with you.
Maybe severely jet lagged right now. I don't know if it works that way when you're coming to the East Coast, Dugan. Clarify.
No, well, and I looked like the Bubble Boy today. I had 2 masks on. I had the face shield on. I was really trying to.
Let's go.
Yeah, the plane was not bad. Airports aren't the best.
Yes.
But yeah, no, actually, Holly, I really liked reading this book as well. I found like every time I was reading it, it was hard to stop, and then realizing like I have to do other things.
Yeah.
And actually, but what was really cool though is like the interlude reminded me, like the very first page reminded me of like going back to see the movie.
Nice.
And honestly, and reminded me of what I remember going to see it midnight. I was like in high school or whatever, and like you knew what was going to happen, but you didn't. Like I'm just thinking, I'm like, I did not want that to happen. I don't want Anakin. But like you and the same thing happened. Like at the beginning of it, it's like the story already happened, nothing can change, and it's just the story already happened, nothing can change. But then it was just, but you already knew the end, but you just still wanted to keep reading. So yeah, no, good pick, Holly. I enjoyed it. Good job.
And that's great storytelling. The fact that Dugan seems to be having, replaying premonitions in his mind of what he knows is going to happen, but he can't stop it. That's great storytelling. The fact that you keep coming back to it and you still have hopes and aspirations that things could very well be different, but alas, they are the same, like Dugan said.
I think you sounded a little bit like Jon Favreau there.
Thank
Star
you.
Wars is a story.
Which
of
one?
hope.
The Pod Save America host or the director and producer of Mandalorian? I'll take both. Okay. Fantastic.
Rob, I know you said that it's been a while since you read the book, but I was just wondering if there's any insight or anything that you remember that you really wanted to
dust off those cobwebs.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, look, I remember the book pretty much. I mean, we all remember the movie, and I've watched the movie multiple times. As in reading the book, I didn't read the book. I'm an audio fan for the most part.
That's true.
And I think really what the difference. Okay, so I'll give my thoughts about the book. The book was good. The audiobook was good because of the background music, because sometimes Star Wars needs that extra thing.
Yeah.
So when you get through the entire book and you get to the point where the author says, I hate you, right? When you read that, you just read it. And those are your mind thoughts. But when somebody actually says it, there's an acting element to the audiobook sometimes. So for me, the beginning wasn't so much boring because there was all the fighting going on in the background. And we could say that's just distortional noise that kind of keeps your mind busy while you're trying to focus in on that. Some people hate it. But for me, I thought that it did start a little slow for the reading. I had that background, so I didn't hate it as much as maybe y'all did. But near the end, man, when you get into those, there's so many points in this when the acting through the reader happens that makes the book, I think, just better in the audiobook, especially when you've already watched the movie a few times and then you kind of add it together. That's just my thought. But overall, it starts out really, really slow and then heats up along the way with the dramatic ending.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny that you bring up the I hate you moment because when I got to that part in the book, I obviously saw the movie before I read this book since I just read it for the first time. But I read the book the physical copy of the book. So all I could hear was Anakin's voice in my head from that scene. But Jory, you said that you listened to the audiobook too. Did you kind of have a similar experience?
Yeah. Similar in a way, like as far as those, it's funny because Rob said, as far as the I hate you part, and I actually thought that was kind of different for me. Maybe it's just my experience with it because I thought the audiobook version of the I hate you, especially just that particular part, I thought it was kind of like downplayed compared to the movie because, when I got to that part, I was like, man, Hayden Christensen did that so much better.
Yeah.
But I also think I had a little bit different of an experience with this than you guys did as well, because I thought that the book pretty much like had me the entire time. Like I didn't feel like it was slow. It's funny because we do this and everybody has a different opinion and perspective on it, but and maybe it's just because I'm listening to it at 2 times speed, so it just everything's fast. But no, I actually thought that the early lightsaber battles were just so much better, and we can get into that later.
Yeah.
But it pretty much had me really at attention the entire time. I think that it's really cool when you go back, and especially we don't get this in Star Wars a lot, where we get a book compared to the movie, or at least we do, but like we don't. It's obviously always the movie, and then we compare it to the book. Where like say Harry Potter or or these other book series that we're always comparing the book to the movie, and we're like, oh, the book is so much better. And I actually think that the novelization of this really for me was so much better because you got so many just deeper thoughts behind everything. You had and once again, the lightsaber fights were just a million times better, and especially if you can visualize, that in your head as far as, how things were going on and stuff like that. I thought it was great. This is one of my favorite movies. I think this was like number 2 on my list. So having the novelization and actually enhancing that experience for me, it was pretty epic.
Yeah, I think that the novelizations of the Star Wars movies are really unique in where when we have the books first and then they make the movies, the directors and the producers of the movies kind of get their chance to play around with it and change things. They have that like creative...
Je ne sais pas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said
Or is
it
it
better
je ne
myself.
sais quoi?
Je ne sais quoi?
Je ne sais pas is I don't know.
Yeah, well, that was also true.
But yeah.
But I feel like the novelizations really come in and fill in some of the gaps that we have. And I think that that's what this book did, especially like uniquely for me when we get to having, kind of seeing Anakin fall to the dark side, which we'll get into later because that was one of my favorite parts of this book. But I think that it filled in so many gaps because we have so many questions for how choppy and quick it happens in the movie that maybe didn't make sense. But after reading the novelization, it does.
Yeah.
But Nettie, I want to get your thoughts.
Got that.
Yeah, say I don't have too much new to add. Say I really enjoyed it mostly.
Mostly.
Say I didn't know why I said mostly. I really enjoyed it. I will echo the thoughts that you guys mentioned that, like, the beginning could be a little slow, and it seems kind of wordy and like exposition heavy for my personal taste. And part of that could obviously be like, I obviously know who Obi-Wan and Anakin is, so giving like that whole chapter that was like flushing out their backstory didn't really matter to me, because we obviously know that, and some of that's even changed now with new canon. But I think once you get past a little bit of that, it definitely picks up. And I would definitely agree with Joy that I think it improves on the movie, just because of, like you guys were saying, how it captivates like the inner thoughts so much more than what you can do in a movie. So I definitely think it was definitely a good read.
Yeah, Jory made a really great point. He sent us some notes earlier. And he did point out that the novel was declared non-canon in 2014.
Huge disclaimer.
So all the things that we're going to talk about, we can compare it to what happens later down the road, but I guess we'll keep in mind that, it's not canon anymore.
Can I offer some thoughts on that, if I might, Holly? Can I be unmuted for a second?
I'm sure
like maybe
you will.
a minute.
Okay.
I'm sure I will. Boy. So when we're talking about the canon versus non-canon discussion, I give these novelizations a pass. And I say that with a little bit of a caveat, because we all know and love the prequels. And I think most of us love the prequels for the story that's being told. And it's almost as if George Lucas has this great story, and so much of it was edited down to be in a film format, that these novels serve a huge purpose, more so than the Rogue One novelization, which I love, and Solo, and those are fantastic. But this is a masterpiece of storytelling, and you're cutting it down to like 2.5 hours when it really needs to be like 4.5.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why I give these a pass and say and now there's some things that obviously are going to strike. They're just going to butt heads with like new canon that we know now. Like the end of this book is a little different than what we know now when reading the comics, but I give it a pass. And I think it's worth reading because, like all these guys have said, it takes even small moments and elevates them in the story where they didn't get the time and do that they should have had in the movie. Like we've talked about when Nettie brought up that deleted scene even that is in this novelization. It's a bit different, but with the senators getting together and saying, we're kind of forming this alliance, like that was necessary and should have been included. And some of the details with Anakin and Padme and their love story and who knew, there's just so much more there that I think would have served the story better in the movie. So I give them a pass. I look at this as canon. I know that's not acceptable, but it's worth it, to be honest, even though I didn't read the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know. This is the first novelization of any of the movies that I've read. So I think that I'm kind of curious to read some of the other novelizations and see if I kind of have the same experience as I read through them.
Yeah.
So if you guys are with me on that, then we'll probably have some other novelizations in the book club.
Let's go.
That we'll be getting into. I'm getting a lot of thumbs up.
Lots
so
of
I
thumbs
think
up.
that is a go.
Absolutely.
But I do have to say this, even though, like we just discussed, it's not considered canon now, I think that it might have given me more appreciation for this film itself. You guys saw my list. The prequels were very low on my list. I just don't typically get a lot of enjoyment out of those compared to some of the other movies. And I think that that's fair. That's just my opinion. So I think I'd be curious to read some of the other novelizations and see if it gives me a different perspective, whether it's considered canon or not, of the films. Because I feel like we understand more and have more insight into the motives behind some of the characters and their reactions per se than we had from the film itself.
Well, and I think this novelization, I mean, yes, the author had a lot of leniency here, but like you have to assume these authors have the story before the movie's made. And that just shows you George Lucas had all this. The story was there. It was fleshed out, and it's being pared down to a cinematic, feature. And that just sometimes is unfortunate. And so I think it's good that you read it. And I think it's good that you'll continue to read it. And I think the prequels will probably have, and this is my experience in reading like the sequel novelizations and stuff. They add nice little nuggets, but nothing like this because the story was pretty fleshed out. Yeah, Jory.
I was just gonna say that I'm sure that the authors did have some liberties that they were able to take,
Yeah.
but I'm also sure that those liberties that they took, that George Lucas probably read through some of those and
Yeah.
was like, hey, we're gonna take this, we're not gonna use this, we're going to, and I'm sure everything was filtered through George.
Yeah.
Maybe he had this this broad overarching, and then said, hey, fill in the blanks, and they
Yeah.
did that, but then I'm sure it was still all filtered right back through George before, it was
Yeah.
released into the public.
Yeah,
Was it-
these are different. This is different
Yeah.
than these EU novelizations that George had no part of, said he didn't care about. This had to have been different, Holly.
Because we even see some of that with the sequel trilogy, right? What was it recently? I don't know if it was the Rise of Skywalker novelization. It might have been one of the comics that they were told you have to rewrite this because this is actually what we're doing in the film.
Yes, that was a comic book that,
That's right.
oh God, I don't remember who was writing it, but they said, yeah, you can't. Oh no, it was The Force Collector.
That's right.
This
It
is the
was
Force
the Force
Collector.
Collector
Yeah.
book.
Yep.
And parts of it had to be rewritten because it was pretty much what they were doing in the film. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that's so fascinating. But also I appreciate them trying to keep as much in line with the story, the bigger story that's going on that they can, because I think we all appreciate it when everything kind of lines up. There's not a lot of plot holes, makes it more fun to read.
Is that, let me ask Jory this, because he's a huge Harry Potter fan, and like he mentioned the distinction between the two, and that when people look at Star Wars, they first look at the movies and say, well, how's the book different? But it's just the opposite with Harry Potter. Is that how are you doing any of that, or is there a clear distinction? Do Harry Potter fans ever make the comparison? Is it just a different thing completely?
For me personally, I actually do just kind of take, like, the movies are here, the books are here,
Yeah.
and that's how I have always done that. Especially in the Harry Potter universe, like that's something you definitely have to differentiate. And I thought it was funny because the way I kind of was thinking about this novelization to the book or to the movies, or the movie, it almost seemed like somebody read this book one time a couple weeks ago and then wrote the story of episode 3 and then said, all right, we're going to make a movie. You know what I mean? Like they got all the major points. They got what they needed out of it. But then they decided that they were, they're like, oh, these little details, we can't really get in there, or we forgot about them, and it's like, and that's almost how this kind of correlates. Like somebody read it a couple weeks ago, they're like, all right, now I'm gonna write a script, and then here's your movie. And it's almost kind of how it felt. Like, everything was there, but it was just a little bit less.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because there were so many times, and we can get into it, but there were so many times that I was reading this book and I was like, man, I wish they would have put that in the movie.
Yeah.
Like the one scene that Michael was talking about with all the senators, and they're telling Padme kind of like what they think about what's going on with the Jedi Council and what's going on with Palpatine and how they want to fix that. And maybe Palpatine's not where he should be. And I just think I wish that we had gotten that scene in the movie.
Do you want to start with some of those? Maybe some people
yeah.
have specific things. They're like, if I could have one scene out of the entire book that wasn't in the film, what would it be? You want to start with that? Yeah,
that's a good question. Okay, so for me, I liked that scene, but if we want to talk about this particular scene I'm about to mention more in depth at the end, towards the end of the podcast, we can, because I think it was a big thing that Michael wanted to touch on too. But at the end, there's kind of this internal, or it might be external. It's actually hard to tell. I think that's up for interpretation, but it's where Anakin Skywalker is now, but he's actually Darth Vader. And it's how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker now.
That was
and it
beautiful.
goes through how he feels like he's imprisoned where he is. And to me, I felt like he was saying he's imprisoned by Palpatine and also physically in the suit that he has, and he's more machine than man.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's in purgatory to me, but also he has to every single day wake up and remember what he did to Padme. And I just wish that they had closed this movie down kind of with those thoughts from Darth Vader's point of view. I think that would have been a fantastic way to end the film.
I love your thoughts of purgatory, because when we all know the history of Darth Vader at this point, right? And thinking of it in that sense, if there's still hope for him, right? It kind of is a purgatory, and he makes the right choices to kind of be released from that suffering that he appears to be in. It's interesting that you brought that up, Holly. We just finished the haunting of not Hill House, but
Bly Manor.
Bly Manor. So a lot of purgatory happening nowadays
It's
in our
on my
lives.
mind.
It happens. But Nettie, what's a scene for you that you, if you could pluck it out of the book and put it into the movie, what would you go with?
Let's see. I think a couple things. Definitely like all the Padme stuff. I think. I just think it adds so much more to her character because her character is pretty much wasted in the movie. If I'm being honest, I feel.
Yes.
I know the book still ends the same way with the lame and dumb twist of dying of a broken heart, but
Yes.
she still has so much more in the book because you have that internal thoughts too of like she doesn't want to go against Anakin, but she wants to do what's right, and realizing that there's kind of a difference there. The conversation she has with Obi-Wan is really cool too. Like Obi-Wan just being like, "Yeah, I know, I just kind of let it happen, but like don't make him leave the order now. He needs it when he really didn't." But that's another whole discussion.
Uh-huh.
So I think all the stuff they did with her character definitely was really well done, and I would have liked to see some more of that. And then I think the scene with Palpatine and fighting the Jedi Council when they go to arrest him was really well done. Because I like the part too, like they make the point of him, like he recorded part of the conversation to use to condemn the Jedi. Because if you watch the movie, it is kind of just like Palpatine's like, yeah, the Jedi attacked me, and like they never really explain like why everybody just kind of believes that.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought that was a really cool thing. Plus, it kind of seemed like the fight maybe like he got the drop on some of the Jedi Masters a little bit better than what he does in the movie. Because in the movie, he just jumps up and kills two of them instantly, which I always thought was a little bit lame. I know it's like you can't really prepare for a man like doing like a 360 like spiral towards you, but it still kind of felt a little bit silly at moments for the movie. So I definitely like the way that scene was fleshed out a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. We were just joined by our very own Luke Elder. Welcome, Luke.
Hey,
Luke, we're talking about a moment in the book. We're going around the table right now. A moment in the book, if you could pluck it, that wasn't in the movie. If you could pluck it out of the book and throw it in the movie, what would it be?
On the spot.
Yeah, coming in hot.
We can
right
come
off
back
the bat.
to you if you need
If
a
you
second.
need
well,
thoughts, that's fine.
I don't know how well this would have worked in the movie, but if you recall the part where it goes in elaborate detail about how he hid his lightsaber in his office, in the Chancellor's office, like that was something I certainly wasn't expecting. The whole how he had the art around, and he always liked to have art around, so it wasn't that conspicuous that there's statues and things lying around his office, and that he had it. I can't remember all the details, if he had it like specially made and then he got rid of the guy who helped make it so that like no one would know that it was hidden inside of there. Like that was pretty neat.
That's crazy.
What is it with the Empire? Like everyone in the
art?
Empire just wants to be collectors.
Well,
It's like they're like serial killers and trophies from their victims. But
I mean,
they
Kylo
just
Ren
collect.
literally hung out with the ashes of his enemy, so that's kind of weird.
It's really weird and very disturbing.
Very disturbing. But Rob, did you have, if you recall, a moment from the book that you would plop right into the movie and make it canon?
Okay, so I'm sorry if I have to be the negative person. I don't want to take anything from the book because I think sometimes things are best left in the book, and that's why you want to read the book and not the movie. So I think if you read it, you explain it more. I want to take this back to Gladiator, the extended version. Okay, so there's a scene where where they execute somebody, and he's lined up, he's sitting there, and this is one of the extra scenes that was deleted, and it ends up being, what am I having a blank about? Was it Cadmus or Commodus? He shoots him himself, and at that point, that Commodus, right? was angry and mean, and nobody would make that move without him during that scene. That was a very riveting scene, but it was left out of the main movie because it was kind of inapparent. It wasn't really needed. You didn't need to see that he was that mean and dastardly already because he killed his fucking father. Ooh.
That's all right.
We're
allowed one F.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be good. And okay, so I was always mad about that point, and the way he killed him too. He like held him close and like suffocated him, and that's it to me why that was left out, but yet could have been. It was just another additive to the character we already knew. I do like that, you know, the whole explanation into the saber being hidden, and of course Vader's thoughts at the end and things like that. That's nice, but I think that again, it comes back. Those are the things you put into a book to make it the cherry on top.
Holly, I want to call Rob an originalist, and no, that is not a topical reference. He likes the movie as it was and keeps the book separate, and I get it. That's what makes the book special, right? Because we can go to that and get those moments. So I totally appreciate that, man. Dugan, is there a moment? I think maybe you would blend them a little bit if you could, but you know, anything you would pluck out of that?
Well, I guess mine would be a little more lighthearted. Nothing too serious. I really liked yours though. No, it was cheesy, but I liked the part of the book when Padme and Anakin exchanged 3PO and R2. Yeah. I just thought that was kind of cool. Like, oh, this is how they kind of switched. And also though, and to the scene that like Luke referenced as well, how in the book they describe the robes kind of coming down from the ceiling instead of him just like flipping up his hoodie. Yeah,
that's cool.
And so that could have been just a little different touch, I guess. But yeah, those are just two little different things.
I like those things that explain the confusion, because you and I talked about this, Holly. Like the I don't know, like some of what Dugan just referenced, but even like the Obi-Wan, like Anakin being so jealous. That's not really fleshed out in the movie. You're just like, why are you so jealous, bro? Like seems like you just turned on a dime. And I feel like what you kind of read to me in the book, they do more with that. So you can maybe understand that like Palpatine's kind of feeding him some of this nonsense.
Yeah. I actually sent a text to somebody about the part to my mom on accident. And the text literally said, oh my God, why is Anakin such a creepy little stalker boyfriend?
Yeah.
And my mom actually had a response.
She's like, is this an ex that you're talking about? Do we need to file charges? Like, what do you need? What do you need, Holly?
No, my mom was like, well, I follow you guys on Facebook and I saw your post, so I actually knew
Jen.
what you were talking about. Thanks,
Follows
Jen.
us, doesn't listen to the podcast, though.
Oh,
Thanks,
does.
Jen.
Oh, my God.
Thanks, Jen. That's fine. That's fine.
But
yeah, it's I like those moments that kind of explain things more, because I'm just like, why are you so freaking out about this, dude? And it makes more sense now after reading the book and I just kind of pretend these things were happening in the movie. We just never saw them.
Okay, we can get to that part in a second, but I want to go back to what Andy said about the exchanging of droids, because it's sometimes those scenes seem like they're really small things, and they would be really cute to have like in the film, but I feel like you don't realize how much that adds to why Padme has such a hard time like agreeing with Obi-Wan when he comes to her later and is like, Anakin did this, and she's like, there's no freaking way, because in her mind he's still the guy that she married who says like, here's my droid, I had him when I was a slave, so technically he wasn't my property, but now that I'm free, my droid is too, so I'm not actually giving him to you. Wow. He's just gonna help you out. Like,
that's really sad.
But it's just like, well, not if he's free.
No, it's terrible.
Oh my God. But there's just like those little moments that happen in this novel that you can see why Padme is kind of like, Anakin would never do something this terrible.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's the sad part.
It's all very sad. It's heartbreaking. Jory, how about you, man? Anything in particular that you'd pluck and throw into the film?
I know that this is kind of a touchy subject because, it's really hard to throw like the lightsaber combat and as far as the forms of combat, because it really kind of gets into the legends and EU stuff. But when they talk about Kenobi being the master of Sarisu, and it's not even that he is a master, he is the master. Yeah. And the fact that he And he doesn't even know it, you know. And I feel like the movies almost did him dirty as far
Come on,
as like
let's go.
as how great of a swordsman that he really was. And it's because it's this just simple form, you know. He's a simple guy,
Let's go.
and he, you know, nothing over the top, but he's just so humble, but he is so good. And I feel like if they would have had that little thing with Mace in there, you know, just talking about, and it didn't even have to be talking about the forms of combat, because that was never fleshed out in any of the movies. You know, that was strictly into the legends aspect of everything. But just giving him that nod of like, you are so much more than what everybody has always thought you were. You know, you are the man. You know,
Yeah.
they even talk about multiple times, you know, throughout, of like, the council sees him in a whole different light that he sees himself.
Yeah.
They see him in a whole different light than Anakin even sees him, because all of his interactions are always, you know, with Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's just so humble. And, you know, it really makes it to where, and especially when you get into those conversations of, you know, who's the best Jedi and swordsman and things like that, you know, people like to have those conversations. And it's like, he is such a badass and he's never given that credit on film, you know, to where, like, if you go into the fight with Dooku at the beginning, like, that is completely different than the movie. Like, I just watched the movie again recently, and he's in that fight for 0.5. He gets thrown away, and then the rest is Anakin, where if you read the novel or listen to the audiobook, like, I mean, he's in that fight for a while. And I understand you can't really put that into the movie, but like, they discredit a lot with Obi-Wan, and I feel like if they would have given him a little more credit, it would really have I don't know. I just want to see Obi-Wan get some more credit.
Yeah, and I think we might have a chance with that with the Obi-Wan series. I hope.
Boy.
I would love that, because I agree, Jory. I think Obi-Wan can sometimes be, I don't know, a little bit like, people can just like write him off.
Yes, yeah, he's sloppy. He's kind of a stumbling idiot.
And that's how he's portrayed in a lot of the movies, right? And you don't really take him seriously. Like, you know, it's big bad Anakin. Like, Obi-Wan, like, whatever. Well, but then you see him, even through this book, you see him kind of transform from like Obi-Wan as you know him in the Clone Wars and in the beginning of this film or this novel. And then at the end of it, you get that depressed, dark, sad Obi-Wan that Michael wants so desperately to see in the film. But you get him even saying, he's telling Yoda, which also, this is one of my favorite moments of this novel. You have this interaction between Obi-Wan and Yoda after they find out that it was a Jedi who went to the temple and slaughtered all the younglings and killed the Jedi Master. I don't recall his name, but the lightsaber master. And Obi-Wan is so devastated, he gets to the point where he said, I should have let the clones kill me. They should have got me with their blasters. And I just feel like it's almost hard to not have an emotional reaction to that, because as much as Obi-Wan is portrayed as that sloppy, like, Jedi who you don't really take seriously because they want you to take Anakin more seriously, I think you can't help but feel so sorry for him and truly love him.
Well, thank God for the final fight scene in the movie, because you're exactly right. They make him look like an idiot throughout the entire prequel, trilogy. However, he's on the freaking council. So that's what never made sense to me. You're making him look like an idiot. He's on the council and he's scratching his beard. Obviously, he's wise. So, and I get it. It's to elevate Anakin. I understand it. But then, like, he owns Anakin. So Jory's right. Like, to give him a little, even little nod of being like, you're a master of something, you don't even realize it. And that's maybe what's great about Obi-Wan, is that kind of like selflessness, and his dedication to the order is what kind of let him to be, kind of the lone gun there at the end. But Holly, you're right. When Holly was reading to me out loud some of these great moments, which was fantastic. I always love being read to, Holly, so thank you for that. But those moments with Yoda and Obi-Wan, and Yoda's realization of his failure, boy, it was giving me chills with your dramatic reading. So I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, I have a good dramatic reading.
Absolutely do. You know, a lot of little flair that I don't think was actually in the book. Holly adds to it, which keeps it interesting. But let's take some of these moments, Holly. Let's talk about some of these big moments in depth, and really flesh these things out. What do you want to start with?
Let's see. I know that we talked a little bit about the lightsaber battles. I know Jory had a little bit of an opinion about those. So I don't know if you wanted to jump in, Jory, but I know you said that the early lightsaber battles are a lot better in the book than you saw them on screen. So I don't know if you wanted to run with that, and was that maybe just the way that they were described? I told you guys that I thought those were a little bit slow for me because I don't think that's really the kind of content that I come to Star Wars for in the book form. Now the movies, I'm all about the lightsaber battles, but the book form, I'm not so much.
Well, let's not sugarcoat. You said effing terrible in the first 50 pages, but go ahead.
Still not what I said.
That's okay.
No, I definitely understand that. Like, it's not for everybody, and I think that, like, for me, like, it was great, and it kept everything flowing pretty well. I just thought that the little add-ons were pretty awesome as far as, like, you got to hear, like, inside their head. I had a note written down, like, Anakin's power when he was defeating Dooku. It was almost Neo-esque, in the Matrix of, like, he just knew. Like, once he started believing that it was true, it almost just came to fruition. It's like he had this, like, epiphany of, he just saw what was going to happen. And he even said to himself, like, all of the extras in between, it's all just detail. It's already written, I'm going to kill him, and it was like he almost got bored with it, and that's when he decided to take both of his hands and kill Dooku. And not even at that point, he didn't decide to kill Dooku. Obviously he was pushed by Palpatine to do so, but he just it like those little things, those little tidbits that you get, as to the Force and and how it played into those little moments are pretty sweet. And then another little spot, and I think this is a little bit later in the book, but Obi-Wan, he uses the Force to open up Grievous's hand, and he drops he drops the lightsaber, and then he's able to dismantle Grievous. And then he does this later on, and I don't want to get too far into it. He does the same thing later on to Anakin, using the Force to open up Anakin's hand, to drop his lightsaber and then get that lightsaber back. Just those little things that you obviously could never get in a movie because you can't get inside somebody's head that's acting. But, those little things are pretty sweet that are just like nice little add-ons.
Jory, for my own information, in that Dooku scene, did they ever talk about Dooku's thoughts in that moment? Because he looks really betrayed in the film. And did they also ever talk about, Palpatine interfering with that confrontation, or was it purely just Anakin kind of tapping into the dark side?
No, they definitely do. And he actually has his own, like, little aside. And you get a pre-battle and then a during the battle, and then almost like his last thoughts. And pre-battle, he's with Emperor Palpatine, and they're doing, they're discussing how everything's supposed to go down, and that's something that you didn't get in the movies. Actually, you didn't even know that that they actually were talking prior to Anakin and Obi-Wan entering the scene, and that's something that they have to flesh out in the book. And then during the battle, you get Dooku's, like, almost realization when he's fighting Obi-Wan and Anakin. You get this, like, point of, he's like, there's no Jedi that can even stand against me. Like, he is just so confident in himself. And then you find out that Anakin and Obi-Wan are feigning everything, and then they, like, just basically turn it on, and he's just like, oh shit, like, this is not good. Like, he has just this, like, oh no, like, I am in trouble. And then that's when he decides he's going to kill Obi-Wan, and then that's when he kind of takes him out of commission. And then, and then that I think is really cool too, because you get to see Anakin and Obi-Wan actually working together as a team and getting this like deep insight as to their and not even really their thought process, but just how they are just this cohesive unit that you didn't really ever see in the movies, like not in a way of like they together they're almost unstoppable. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And then at the very end, right before he dies, he has these thoughts of like, oh no, like it just the betrayal by Palpatine and how all of his life, he thought was leading up to, this grandeur, and he was going to be like the general of the Sith army. And then he realizes right before the end that his whole life was just set up to lead to Anakin taking over.
Just a pawn.
They say treachery. The chapter, I think, begins and ends with the same line, and that's treachery is the way of the Sith.
Yes. How do they fall for it every time? They know what's going to happen.
And the novel really jumps you right into understanding how Palpatine has this all planned out.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just me, but when I read through that, Jory, I was like, man, Palpatine built Dooku up and gave him this false sense of confidence because he knew he was going to use him as a pawn.
Yes.
And he was like, no Jedi can strike you down. It will never happen. And then he used Dooku to then boost Anakin's confidence in having Anakin kill him to be like, look what you can do when you feel like you need to. It might not be what the Jedi have told you to do, but you knew it was right when you felt like you needed to kill him because he was too dangerous to keep alive.
And then he reminds you of all the terrible things that have happened in your life and why it's justified. He's done it with every single person he's taken on as an apprentice, and it's his mastery. I freaking love it. What's another big moment that we can really, really dig into?
Jory, I think you might have had something else to say.
Oh, shit. Sorry, buddy.
No. Okay. Oh, gosh. I don't know. You guys feel free to jump in if there's something that we're missing that you guys want to talk about.
Hey, Mike or anyone else who read the Legends Plagueis book, in that, do you get more of like a Palpatine perspective at all? That? You do?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's so much. You get his background with his parents and how he was kind of, Darth Plagueis kind of went out and sought him. Yeah, there's a lot of Palpatine in it. As much as it's a Plagueis book, lots of Palpatine. It's fantastic. But that's what it makes you kind of feel bad for him because it shows you kind of, I mean, he killed his family and like terrible things. Like Star Wars has a way of making you feel kind of bad for these villains and saying, I get it. Sometimes you just gotta murder your family. Sometimes, I'm just kidding. That there's no justification for that. This is
like the Amityville horror now.
You're absolutely right.
No, I will say this. I don't know if any of you guys felt this way, but reading this in the book, that scene where Dooku realizes that he was just a pawn for Palpatine, I did kind of feel bad for him. Yeah. And then I felt gross.
Dooku, Jedi lost. The man had potential, but then again, was he? Oh boy, the whole ending with Yoda realizing his failures, and maybe he could have learned something from Dooku, and maybe things could have been different. I don't know. That's probably a 4-hour discussion for another time. But
I don't know. Okay, something else that I'm sure that this is very obvious in the movies, and I'm going to admit it's been a really long time since I've actually seen this movie. I think it's been since we watched
2005.
Yeah.
Probably.
Sure.
Boy.
Anyway, I just you really start to realize and have an appreciation for how much Palpatine knew. I feel like there's more, you understand how much more he knew reading through this novel than you truly know from watching the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys thought that too, but he knew.
The one thing about that kind of at least brought it to light a little bit more in the book, especially when Anakin was a young Padawan, why was Palpatine just around Anakin all the time? Or not all the time, but why was this young boy around the Chancellor by himself?
Right?
Yeah. It doesn't make, it just even to allow all those opportunities, it's hard to imagine why some of those were even around and how those arose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt weird. Like
Yeah.
it seems like Palpatine's like a pervert at points. Like, why are you?
Probably
like,
was.
Yeah.
He probably was.
I mean, there are lots of weird themes like that in Star Wars. You have Luke and Leia sharing a little bit of romance.
Padme
You
and
have a
Anakin.
9-year-old child
Yeah.
realizing that he was going to marry a woman when he got older.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought that was weird too. Also, like of how many senators there are,
Mhm.
I understand that he's like the guy, but also like why was he around Anakin so much more than Anakin was around like all the Jedi and training? Like, shouldn't have that been taking up more time?
He's a trusted ally, and Palpatine, if there's some information that's going to help him use that against you in the future, he's involving himself. Yeah, Jory.
Well, I think they kind of start like they don't really explain as to why. They don't really give a good explanation. But the little tidbits that you do get, like even from Mace Windu's perspective, is that the Jedi Council really trusted Palpatine like a lot, and I don't know how long he was in that position of power, to have that kind of position of power, but up until and this is another point that we can talk about Mace Windu's shatter points. But up until like really later on, or almost to this book, it seemed like Mace even was really on board with what Palpatine was doing.
Yeah.
So if he has that much influence, even on the masters of the Jedi Order, you can only imagine what what they trusted him with. Anakin really seems to. We kind of guess that Anakin was kind of like the problem child at the Jedi Academy, and so they're like, maybe letting him talk to this other guy, this almost like grandfather figure, or uncle figure, or whatever he was to Anakin. It seems like every time he goes there, he comes back and and he does really well. And so they're like, let's let him keep going. Let him talk to Palpatine. It kind of seems like that he talks some sense into him, and then good things happen afterwards. So we don't really get that. And this is all just speculation, but maybe some good things were coming out of it. So they're like, you know what, we're just gonna let him go because he's the chosen one, and we need him, ready to go when it all comes down to it.
Yeah, that blind faith in the chosen one that ultimately leads to their failure, for sure.
No, that's true. That came up a lot in this novel too. Like, and even Anakin would say that, like, when Palpatine was like, join me, Anakin was like, but I'm the chosen one. This is not what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And Palpatine's like, are you going to let that hold you back?
Boy.
God, what an ass.
Yeah. It also makes you wonder, like, what that relationship between the Chancellor and the Jedi has been like in the past. I all we really see is Valorum, and I think they talk about it at some point in some of the books I've read, like past chancellors, and Luke may even be able to allude to it, but like maybe the relationship wasn't that great, and Palpatine was just kind of like, hey, yeah, guys, whatever you need, like, man, thanks for saving me on Theed, like whatever it is that you need, like he said with Anakin, you want a planet, great, it's yours.
The whole system, have it.
Yeah, he wants. That's how he gets you on his side. Whatever it is that you need, I got deep connections. I can make that happen for you.
Yeah.
That's just his master of manipulation.
I told Michael, I said that's also very topical because it feels like everything with Palpatine is very transactional.
Holly, I feel not to make it topical, but a lot of transactional conversations going on in the book.
There are just a lot of parallels to politics in the United States today that I could not stop seeing.
It's a good. Hey, that's why it's intriguing stuff.
Do we know, guys? This is just my own ignorance. I don't know if this is stuff that anybody knows. Probably Luke. How far back the history of the Senate goes. I guess since Michael was talking about like what the relationship with the Chancellor and the Jedi Council was before, I don't know if that's something that we would get in like the High Republic stuff too, or if it doesn't go that far back. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's been around for decades.
Yeah, I think it goes back quite a while, but there's some other stuff in like the Clone Wars series that kind of hints at the relationship between, I think, the Chancellor's office specifically and the Jedi, where there's the great episode where they're digging into the past of Sifo Dyas and how he disappeared, And he was sent on a special mission by the Chancellor's office when it was Chancellor Valorum. So I think that goes to show you that like the Chancellor, the Jedi Order in its tying itself to working together with the Republic government, the Chancellor's office is like the main liaison, I think, between the Order and the Republic government. And so I think part of Palpatine's continuing relationship with Anakin is through that like vector, that it's just natural for the Chancellor to be involved with the Order as the main person liaising with the Order. So he can kind of work that into, plus the history of him, Anakin helping save his planet. He can, get in there, and it's not seen as like totally like crazy that Palpatine's involved with him. I think is part of that.
Yeah. I guess that's also true since Anakin and Padme obviously had a pretty close relationship, especially as Anakin got older, and Padme and Palpatine. Why did I almost just forget his name? I don't know.
Yeah.
But Anakin would be closer to Palpatine because he would be around Padme, and her and Palpatine kind of had that still kind of closer relationship.
Well, even the little tidbit that we know about the High Republic, they say even 200 years ago, I think it was 200 years ago, right?
Sure.
There was a difference that the Republic and the Jedi were a little more separate, and it's only more of a recent thing to where, they're not just doing the bidding of the Chancellor, but that relationship's a lot closer. And like Luke said, it seems like Palpatine's really kind of bringing them even closer together, and Anakin seems to be the common thread.
Well, he's like inserted himself into every aspect of Anakin's life, right? I mean,
yes.
In my opinion, he's the one who, and guys, you can tell me if you don't agree with this. When I was reading this book, I said to Michael, I was like, so Palpatine's the one who made Anakin have that dream about Padme dying in childbirth, right? Because then Palpatine brings it up later in the book, and he knows about their marriage. He tells Anakin, he uses that against Anakin. Like, I know, like, you and Padme can be really happy together. Like, I know you guys are married and you guys have been hiding it. And he just like, I feel like everything that Anakin does, Palpatine's behind.
Oh, absolutely. I thought that was one of the most powerful things about this book, is that even the like we said, the mistrust about Obi-Wan, like that came out of left field for me in the movie. Like, wait, what? Like, obviously Obi-Wan's only been around her when you're around. He ain't hitting on her. But like, Nettie, is that like, I don't know. To me, that's the red meat of this book, is really showing Palpatine kind of sowing those threads of mistrust and really sinking his teeth into this impressionable kid who thinks he's the chosen one, but there's also a lot of pressure on him. He even admits that too, doesn't he? I think he says it in the book, being all this pressure on him. Yeah. Was that a really important part of this book to you as well?
Yeah, I would definitely say they do a really good job of showing that. I don't know if there's too many conversations in the book that out in the movie itself, but they flush them out a lot more. Yeah. Plus, the ability that they can go inside the heads of Anakin and Palpatine just adds that other level to it that you're not going to get usually. And so, like we've all touched on, I think at this point, you see Anakin's fall from a different perspective, and I think it makes a lot more sense in the novel than it does if you just watch the film. And yeah, I think it's definitely fleshed out here. And while we're on the subject of Palpatine, something that popped into my mind is, and he might do this in a movie and I'm just remembering, but he always calls Anakin, he always goes, my boy, my boy.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw that, immediately I thought of Snoke, and I have the Kylo Ren comic here, and literally that's how he meets him. He's just my boy.
It makes so much sense.
Obviously these are written like 15 years apart, but I think it's kind of cool that maybe that does show that some of the Snoke stuff was planned with the Palpatine from the beginning. I thought that was kind of cool because, and like I said, if I'm wrong and he does call Anakin my boy in the movie all the time, correct me, but I don't remember that. So I just thought that was kind of some kind of cool details in there.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the parallels between what happened in this novel and what we see in the sequel trilogy, especially I think The Rise of Skywalker. I know I had some notes written about that, and then Jory sent in some notes. Nettie just brought it up. The first note that I wrote down was from when Kenobi Sidious is having a conversation and he says, his master was my Padawan. In a sense, he's practically my grandson. And I just thought that, I see Jory giving a thumbs up. I just felt like that's so funny because as we find out, Sidious does have a grandchild. And it, in some moments when I'm reading through the stuff in this novel, the different parallels that I found, I was like, it's almost like when they were making The Rise of Skywalker, like this novel was kept in mind. And some of the things that happened in this book was kept in mind to kind of bring it back full circle. I don't know, Jory, you had some other parallels to The Rise of Skywalker that you mentioned too, if you want to bring those up.
Yeah, just so, because I think you might have misquoted that, Holly, and I know what you meant, but it was actually Dooku that said that he's practically my grandson, which I knew you knew that, but Dooku says he's practically my grandson, talking about Obi-Wan because he trained Qui-Gon and then Qui-Gon trained Obi-Wan. And I knew you knew that, but no, I thought that there were a few different parallels, and one of the biggest ones came at the end when Yoda versus Sidious or Palpatine or whatever we want to call him, and they had a little description in there. It said that it was more than Yoda versus Sidious. It was all of the light versus all of the dark, and they said it's even more than all of the Jedi versus all of the Sith. It was light versus dark. And it kind of spoke to The Rise of Skywalker because it was all of the Sith versus all the Jedi, and that was kind of what they were getting at. It's light versus dark, and Rey even says, Palpatine brings it up first. I am all of the Sith, and then she has her whole little flipping of the lightsaber behind her back, and crossing of the guard, and then says, and I am all of the Jedi, which is almost a little praise to Endgame as well, but we won't get into that right now. But no, like I thought that they did pull from this, and it was just really cool. And I think that you, with your comparison there, that they almost had this on the table of like, hey, this was pretty cool from the novelization. Maybe we can incorporate it into into The Rise of Skywalker, but just so happens Endgame did it right before them, so kind of a little bit of a. But no, there were a lot of parallels through this.
Something else in that same scene, Jory, that was really striking to me. I think it's one of the things I read out loud to Michael because I was like, this feels like the last scene in The Rise of Skywalker. I feel like when I was watching that scene where Palpatine comes out on his creepy crane and Rey, he's like, strike me down, and you have in the background all of those figures in the red cloaks. And when I was watching that, I was like, this is creepy AF. And who the hell are these people? And then in this novel, I feel like they kind of explain that a little bit when they talk about how they're like the thousands of years of Sith. And they call them, what do they call them? Like the red hoods, or there's, I don't have the page number written down. Somebody can correct me later. But yeah, they reference like the color of the cloaks that they're wearing, which we also see in that scene in The Rise of Skywalker. And I just felt like that was
Palpatine himself
cool.
is wearing you don't really see him wearing. I mean, he as the Emperor in Revenge of the Sith, you see it a little bit, but it's really pronounced in The Rise of Skywalker. And whether they like Nettie alluded to, maybe it leads to a little more the idea that they had an idea that they were going to bring Palpatine back. I don't know if I fully buy it, but it makes you wonder even more. At least they went back to this material and they said, we want to make this feel like the prequels. We want to give a nod to that story and tie it in and give maybe Palpatine that moment that it didn't really feel like him and Yoda battling out was that epic of a moment to me. What Holly read, it made even Yoda sound a little more arrogant. Even though he seems a little arrogant and saying it, that they're not as whatever he said.
I think that it's actually a humbling moment for Yoda because he says, and suddenly in that moment he realizes that the Jedi have been doing it all wrong, and when the Jedi have been focusing on winning the battle by how they should have won the last battle, the Sith for years have been studying the lore of the Jedi, and they've been moving forward and progressing and changing. And Yoda says, it's my fault that the Jedi Order failed. I failed because I didn't allow them to progress. Jory?
No, but I also think that that speaks to Yoda's wisdom, to that he could actually see that, because we always think of the Jedi, and I agree that they were so blinded by their arrogance, but the fact that their Grand Master was able to see that in himself and say, we've been doing this all wrong. I think that that's a huge moment for Yoda, and it's something that we could almost look up to him for and say, oh, you know what? They realized they messed up, or at least he did. And then he was able to, move on and decided that they were going to train, Luke or Leia, whichever one came in, when they were ready, not from infancy, but when they were ready, to be trained. And I thought that was a pretty awesome moment for Yoda. I did also think that the speculation for the movies wasn't really brought into the novelization, because like when you see Yoda grab the lightning in the movie and he's able to almost absorb it and then throw it back at Palpatine, you almost feel like Yoda has tampered with the dark side at some point. You know what I mean? Almost has he broadened his own horizons even past what he teaches to his students. And you didn't really get that in his inner thoughts. But the fact that he was able to do that, to take the lightning and then redirect it, especially if you listen or read into the EU a little bit more, you have to understand that that's not something that a Jedi can just do. That's something that you have to have had a little bit of knowledge prior to and tampered into the dark side. And actually, this kind of takes me back to my childhood, because my dad, that was one of the first things he said to me. He was like, the fact that he can do that, like, and my dad's not even a real like super nerd, because my dad actually listens, and he's like, you guys are way nerdier than I ever was. And but he's like, that was one of the first things he said to me. He's like, the fact that Yoda was able to do that means that he, had to at some point have tampered with the dark side. And then it's just kind of cool.
And what makes you think maybe, he was Dooku's master? Dooku was pretty open-minded about things, ultimately led him to the dark side. But Yoda's also taught probably thousands of Jedi. So who knows, could that influence have kind of, let off on some of his Padawans? I don't know. Can we talk about that idea of Yoda's failure and his realization of that failure and how quick it was? Like, Jory likes that. I'm kind of glad they've done what they've done with Yoda and gave him time, because it's it took them, they were failing for 1,000 years, right? Like, I think Yoda says specifically, like, we were just preparing for yesterday's battle or something like that. We were just doing the same thing for 1,000 years. And to me, for him to just be like, wow, I really jacked up like so quickly, and being like, I've already lost, like before the battle has even begun, he's having this realization. Like, that is epic. But I kind of like that, because to me now, and then the huge spoiler alert for the book, that he talks to Qui-Gon. We already know he does, but Qui-Gon actually talks to him in the story. And it kind of, to me, takes away a little bit from Qui-Gon and what Qui-Gon's learned and how much he is going to teach Yoda in years to come. And it just takes me to Yoda's moment with Luke on Ahch-To, and how much, how much time it's going to take for someone to kind of learn from these, hundreds of years of failures. And that's the thing. Yoda's been there the whole time for the most part.
It's like you read the book.
I didn't. I need to disclose that for everyone just starting to listen now. I did not read the book, but like, I understand Luke Skywalker a little more, having those realizations and be like, I kind of messed up. But Yoda, this is like decades of learning and failure on his part. And it is cool that he had that moment, but I don't know. I kind of like that he sits on it for a while, and on Dagobah, much training he has to do. And I kind of like that. And maybe they can kind of live together there. But Luke, you and I tend to share a lot of thoughts on Star Wars. So what did you think of, because it's obviously, it's not really, accepted now in canon that Yoda. Well, maybe it is. Maybe Yoda had this realization, and that's canon. I don't know. But what do you think about that moment? Can it live with Star Wars as we know it now, or no?
I'm down with it.
Down with it?
I'm sorry, I don't have like a lot more than that. Let somebody else go.
That's okay.
I liked that moment because I feel like there's like this whole idea where people are like, the Jedi are amazing and they're so perfect and they have nothing wrong with them and there are no flaws. And Yoda's like, no, actually, I am so in tune with the Force that now I can realize immediately everything that went wrong. And I just thought that, I don't know, I liked that moment because I think that maybe if we all were a little bit more like Yoda, it could be a little better. That was so cheesy.
I just think about, like, I don't know, Yoda and Luke and their training, and I just feel like there was then so much to be shared, and maybe that was just Yoda kind of saying, well, Luke, that's your path, and I can't really give you all this information. Like, you got to find your own destiny.
Here's the thing. Yoda said in this book, he said that a lot of these things have to be taught. You cannot just inherently know them.
A lot of pen slamming going on in the podcast.
Yes,
great for podcasting, Holly. Just want to say that sound travels through the microphone.
Okay. You want to talk about why couldn't this just be said? You were the one who brought up, Michael said, why can't we talk about the failure of Qui-Gon Jinn for a second?
Jesus.
If we know from this novel,
come on,
we have it here in writing. That Qui-Gon has been, the Force has been talking to Yoda in Qui-Gon's voice. We can assume that it's Qui-Gon sharing things.
Did
with
he
Yoda.
say how many years?
Yeah, there were 13. Lucky number 13.
Yeah.
Michael was like, why couldn't have you talked to Anakin? And then Qui-Gon at the end of the novel shares with Yoda this whole idea of eternal life, which is exactly what Anakin is trying to seek for Padme. And if Qui-Gon had just come out and talked to Anakin and told Anakin,
Star Wars would have been completely different.
It would have been done.
Let's talk about the failure of Qui-Gon Jinn. I'm not talking about him getting stabbed by Darth Maul. Yeah, you got to stay lower, buddy. Okay? Don't get that high, they're going to stab you right in the stomach. But if he's talking, someone talk to me about this. If he's talking to Yoda here, clearly he's been communicating with for years. And we know in episode 2, when Anakin is slaying the Tusken Raiders, he can very clearly communicate at that point. And he seems to be an enlightened individual at this point. Like, why wasn't he talking to Anakin? Is that something anyone's ever thought about? Like, anybody?
It's just not canon. Not canon now.
It's just not canon.
Maybe it just doesn't matter.
Holly thought maybe Palpatine's preventing that from happening. Maybe Anakin's kind of dabbling with the dark is preventing that from happening. I don't know. Nettie, is that something you thought about?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it too much before, but now that you brought it up, the two thoughts came to mind. One was that maybe Palpatine was somehow blocking Anakin from that influence.
Yeah.
The other one is in the Certain Point of View book.
Yes.
There's a short story in here called Master and Apprentice, not to be confused with Claudia Gray's actual book, Master and Apprentice. But where Qui-Gon comes and talks to Obi-Wan, it's actually during New Hope when Luke runs back to the farm to find his family dead, and Obi-Wan's like cleaning up the Jawas. Qui-Gon's talking to Obi-Wan, and the way they kind of present Qui-Gon, it's almost like he's like a being outside of time. Like, they kind of heavily hint that he knows Obi-Wan's about to die, but he's not going to tell Obi-Wan that, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I think if you look at like the Obi-Wan story that does take place when he dies, it's kind of, you get kind of some of the same aspects with that. So I don't know if maybe you could like argue something like Qui-Gon knew Anakin would have to fall.
Great
but, like,
point.
It's kind of that idea of like, if you look at like just regular Catholicism or Christianity or something, that like, how are you all powerful and all good? And like maybe sometimes like it's not all like being all powerful and all good doesn't mean all controlling. Like you have to kind of like see it play out. And I think maybe it's something like that. I don't know. I think there could be a case for that.
It's almost like he's in the world between worlds, seeing the future play out, and he's like, this is the path he has to go down for the Empire to actually fall. That's genius. Of like, I could intervene. Well, where would that? This is how it's destiny. This is what's supposed to happen. He needs to go through this.
Yeah.
His story isn't finished. Like, that's fantastic, Nanny. Thank you for clearing that up for me. That totally makes sense now. Now I'm off my tangent.
It all just comes back to destiny, Michael.
That's what Star Wars is about.
I got you.
Rob, you got it?
Look, you guys have my mind just going over
Same.
here. Okay. I have like 20 things written down, but I'm not going to talk about them all. Look, first of all, when we're talking about a Neo-esque moment with Anakin, that was done all in like one swift moment. Yeah. In the book, we had the talk. But if you go back to the movie, when Anakin comes in, he goes, it's so smooth. It does show how powerful he is. And it sets the tone because he takes a command from Palpatine. To me, he was called my boy. It was working towards that. But at the same time, Anakin took that command. He said, just do it. Done. And he just chopped them. But Dooku deserved that bullshit. Because Dooku, for years, had tried to kill Palpatine because Dooku always wanted to be the most powerful because he was arrogant. And that's what Sith become. Sith are arrogant. All of them. Even the books, the EU, everything, they're always arrogant. Right? And so at that point, when you say, like the book says, Anakin made Dooku drop the lightsaber. Did Palpatine maybe do that? Because Palpatine really is just the author of the whole movie, anything, the 9 movies. Palpatine is the author. So if he's writing, he did it all. That's just my thing. And I think at the same time, look, the Jedi trusted Palpatine because of Padme, because of where he came from. And that's why they did that. And I think also, going back, the Clone Wars books also broke up Anakin and Obi-Wan. So you got a little bit of insight to how they would act without. And I think that's where Rex excelled because, and then Rex eventually excelled with Ahsoka. And we've seen all this stuff. So then when you do that, you go back to the betrayal. And the Jedi Temple has been destroyed multiple times. So I don't know what I'm giving you the best, smallest thing leading up to what I got to say. So we know that it's been destroyed. Palpatine is the writer. He kills. He ultimately wants somebody to be, he doesn't want to be his master. He doesn't want to be Plagueis. He doesn't want to be like, my Padawan killed me. So he's just like, gonna kill you before you get powerful. Kill you before you get powerful. Kill you before you're powerful. Again, writing the story. But the arrogance of the Jedi, when you were talking about Yoda, we had this discussion on the Casual Council multiple times that Yoda always overlooked stuff. And then we talked about the dark side. Is that the dark side in Yoda? Is it really the dark side in Yoda? Because maybe the one thing that Yoda took from the dark side was the arrogance, he could look past that. But in the end, again, this is why I separate the EU in the movies, is because no matter how arrogant every single one of them, and then y'all brought up the 1,000 years that this is, which also, of course, coincides with the Sith planet that was hidden for about 1,000 years. Yet there was a leader on that planet that Yoda and Palpatine didn't know about, but the books, they portray that leader in the same voice on the audiobooks like Palpatine. So when you all said all of this together and how Anakin was made and how it all, like the whole like the movies and some of these books may have been Palpatine's doing, but for me, because of reading the EU, the questions, and I've said this multiple times, the questions always pop into my head. How the heck didn't anybody know about this? If they're all so powerful, how didn't they know about that? Because it's not canon. And because it's not canon, canon is simply created off of the movies, the Clone Wars, and maybe a few other things. And I think that's what gives it its nice little jelly roll.
Yeah, there's too much in the expanded universe for them to even like control, and I think that's a lot of the reason why they kind of just pared it down to what we have now. But what Rob was talking about, the arrogance of Yoda, it's interesting because it doesn't seem to be like a dark side in Yoda, because even Palpatine, when they're kind of trading insults back, and I forget what Yoda says is his downfall, and he says your arrogance is yours. It's almost like he doesn't recognize like Yoda's arrogance as a Sith trait or a dark side trait. It's almost just like you're just an arrogant Jedi. It's something different for sure. But I don't know. It's Yoda's a complex character, and I think we probably could have learned a lot from a Yoda spinoff. I would like to know a little more about, I don't know. Can he really just forget a 900 years worth of training and doing in one moment? That's a very enlightened individual, but I don't know. I'd be interested to learn a little more about that gentleman. Jory?
No, I actually think that a Yoda spinoff would be freaking amazing for Star Wars. They just have so much that he can go off of, and to get his. I mean, you have so much in his backstory, but even just getting inside of his head and to see what Yoda's, his being in canon now, where his head was at, post this or even prior to all this. There's so much there. But Rob brought up a pretty good point. And, it kind of made me think of a question. And, like, would Palpatine have made sure that Anakin was handicapped if he wasn't maimed by Obi-Wan, in their final battle, or not their final battle, but their first battle of him being Darth Vader? Because if you get into the Sith thought process, is the master is always looking for the apprentice's betrayal. And, and so, with that being said, we know that Palpatine is always looking for the upper hand. He's always like, he is the ultimate Sith. Even prior to anything in Star Wars, there's really not anything that compares to Palpatine in EU. And so, like, would he have done something to make sure that Anakin was always handicapped in that way? If things would not have, and I know we're speculating here, but if things have not gone down the same way they did at Mustafar, would he have done something to make sure that Anakin was always reaching for that apple that he can never quite reach it, and always needing Palpatine to where he never, betrayed him? Because we kind of get into the end when Anakin becomes Darth Vader, and especially if you get into some of the backstory with Darth Vader, like he created this suit for him that always put him in pain, always made him always like he handicapped him with this suit that is actually saving his life. But if this all would not have happened, would there have been something that he was able to keep him in an arm's length of just, always reaching for this apple that, you never quite get, you're always going to need me? Because if you go into any of these EU stories, that's always where these masters are. They're never giving you all of their knowledge, because you need them. And so that's why you're not going to betray them.
Luke's ready for this one.
I just want to say one word before Luke goes. No matter what, Abeloth beheaded that ruler of the planet.
Abeloth is gonna find a way somehow into this novelization, though not mentioned.
Abeloth would have just ate them all up. She fought like 4 Sith. Luke, Ben. Okay, come on, man. She fought like 7 Jedi, and she was completely. But again, going back 1,000, Abeloth comes around every 1,000 years. So why didn't nobody know about Abeloth? She was written out. Too powerful.
Star Wars may need some material. They may pull it in at some point. We'll have to see. Luke.
Specialist on the dramatic readings, but if you permit me, since Jory's brought up the end of the novel, it really is to me the best part of the novel. And I'd like to do a little bit of dramatic reading because I don't know if we spent enough time sort of talking about the Padme Anakin relationship and how it leads him to make the decisions that he makes. But the end of the novel is brilliant. And I've cut this up a little bit and edited it slightly. But this to me, I want to get a little discussion on if we could. It's, as Anakin is realizing that Padme's dead, and like Jory's talking about finally being in the Vader suit after his defeat. It says you killed her because finally, when you could have saved her, when you could have gone away with her, when you could have been thinking about her, you were thinking about yourself. It is in this blazing moment that you finally understand the trap of the dark side, the final cruelty of the Sith, because now yourself is all you will ever have. And you rage and scream and reach through the Force to crush the shadow who has destroyed you. But you are so far less now than what you were. You are more than half machine. You are like a painter gone blind, a composer gone deaf. You can remember where the power was, but the power you can touch is only a memory. And so, with all your world-destroying fury, it is only droids around you that implode, and equipment, and the table on which you are strapped shatters. And in the end, you cannot touch the shadow. In the end, you do not even want to. In the end, the shadow is all you have left, because the shadow understands you. The shadow forgives you. The shadow gathers you unto itself. So, to me, like, that's the beauty of the whole prequel arc, is the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker. And I think that's where we talk about this a lot, and I think it's where people get sort of don't appreciate the prequels in the right way, and a lot of the times is that they love badass Vader, and we all love badass Vader to some degree. The Rogue One hallway scene, and people will cheer for that and say that's so sweet. But as we've talked about in the comic line, Vader is a pathetic slave, who is just in his own spiral of grief constantly, that he can't even be a proper Sith. And to me, like, this really highlights like the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, and Revenge of the Sith is one of my very favorite Star Wars movies. I think this author just captured so many of those moments in these really profound ways.
And it goes without. I like that the author like highlighted that for us, like his ultimate just failure, but what we've seen play out in the Vader comics and all that we've read since this moment, Palpatine had broke him. Like that's essentially what it was. He has just broken him. And when Jory says, like, would he have had to have done anything else to kind of shorthand him? And I really don't think that he would have felt the need to do that. I think he had manipulated every aspect of this child to make him just that, my whipping boy, I can do whatever I please with him. Yeah, go ahead and look for your dead wife and try to find answers. It's not going to matter. You're just going to find pain and you're going to come running back to me. He's just completely been broken, and the author could not have summed that up better. And it could just go without saying, if you continue to read on in canon what that relationship's like, he's just completely broken Anakin to where, like Jory said, I don't think he would even need to do anything at this point. Jory?
I just want to thank Luke for elegantly stating what I was trying to say anyways in my rambling, because I kind of got on two different tangents. So no, that's exactly what I was trying to get at, Luke, and perfect.
I have a rebuttal to Michael.
Jesus. Go figure.
I dissent. I think, to answer Jory's question, I actually do think that Palpatine would have had to do something differently, because I don't think that I know Jory said the word handicap. I don't know if saying like emotionally handicapping Darth Vader is like the politically correct thing to say. I don't know how else to say it, but I don't think that worked, because in the last scene, you have Vader or Anakin, whoever you want to say he is at that point, saying to himself, everything is going according to plan. I just have to get to Padme, and then Palpatine or Sidious and I are going to have like a fatal, I don't remember the word that he says, falling out.
Mhm.
And I think that even though he had emotionally beaten Anakin down at that point, Anakin's plan was still to get rid of Palpatine, to learn how to save Padme, and then his plan was to kill Palpatine.
Mhm.
And so I think that we still know from what we've seen in the comics, and I know this isn't canon, but I know from what we've seen in the comics that are canon now, he still kind of goes against what Palpatine wants him to do.
Oh yeah.
And he's going out on his own. He's trying to find out what happens to Padme, which we see that disconnect here. But I think that having this physical handicap is kind of keeping him from completely taking out Palpatine. And I think that if he didn't have that, I think Palpatine would have had to do something else to him to keep him kind of under control, if you will.
Let me say then, okay, yeah, exactly. Because we both know that ultimately the conclusion is Vader's redemption and all of that. So I would say that I think the handicap, so to speak, of you know, the suit and all of the injury, and I think that prolonged things probably. Yeah. I think he eventually could have, but I think that's actually. I think it actually took that, bringing him down to a level of, he's literally been stripped down to like just what matters. You know, his fancy, he's still powerful, yes, but those days of old Anakin are gone. I feel like it actually did a service to Anakin more than anything, because he had fallen to the dark side. We cannot say that he hasn't. It very clearly states he has. That's known. I think it just, I don't know. I think it could have actually went a different way had this not happened. Had he not been stripped down to this point where he depended on this suit and realized that I'm just this man. I am not the chosen one. It will be my son. It will be someone far greater than me. I don't know. I think it could have went either way, and maybe that's the beauty of not really knowing definitively.
Yeah, I don't know, Luke. I think you came in right after this when we started talking about like what scenes you would have wanted to see in the movie that we got in the book but not in the movie, and some variation of that excerpt that you just read is what I said I think would have been really effective in the film.
Well, so did Anakin have the realization then, like Palpatine's telling him this, did he realize it then? Because, and that's what's so different about the comic that we're reading, is that it doesn't feel like he's had that realization yet of like, crap, that was me. I did that. Or is it just complete denial? And he knew this information. It makes it much more tragic when it doesn't, he doesn't continue on thinking that something else happened. I kind of like that it ended that way.
Because that passage is, if you were Anakin Skywalker today, this is what, like how you would feel every day when you woke up.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Very sad.
I got something to say since y'all were talking about that armor. I mean, you see all these books talking about the armor, hyping it up, making it, it's fire resistant, it's this, all that. Let's go back to the video games. Let's go back to the books. How many times did that armor get busted up? How many times, like, you look at it and you take a step back and you're like, he became dependent on that armor. And somewhere in that time when y'all were just alluding to it, he knew that Palpatine's electric would fry him. So he knew at that point, Empire Strikes Back, that he needed to get Luke powerful enough, hence the comics, because he was mad about that, to get him powerful enough to take over Palpatine. Because I think ultimately, and this goes back to the video games too, Vader's a tank. So if Vader and Luke would have originally attacked Palpatine, Vader would have went in swinging, because that is Anakin's mindset. He'd have got fried, and Luke would have dealt the killing blow. But that's not how it worked out, is it? Because
Rob is the master of alternate endings.
I know.
I could think it up. But
I'm writing a fan fiction on the podcast right now.
That's true.
We could act it out. I mean, I don't know what I'd be. But at the same time, I think it goes back to the armor and all of you talking about how Palpatine / all of the Sith leaders always tried to keep the Padawan so weak. But in Palp's instance, he actually studied a little more to overthrow Plagueis. Vader did it a little differently. He went on looking for things because he knew he couldn't really take him straight up, because once that happened, he was fried. And a couple saber blows, like he wouldn't even had to pull out his lightsaber, Palpatine that is, to really take out Vader, because he could just fry his ass. But at the same time, I think that plays a little more into why and how he could have made Luke that killing blow. And it didn't work out, but he became reliant on the armor through the stories of the video games, these comics, and throughout a lot of the other things, because that's what really made him. It protected him from bullets. It protected him from this. It protected him from that. But it did get broke, just like real armor, you know?
Yeah. There's also a lot going on in the Empire, too. Like, Vader has a lot more to think about than he did, like, you know, when he was Anakin or whatever. You have big time players in the Empire that have their own ambitions, and the Emperor, they have the Emperor's attention. There's a lot more to consider at that time too. Yeah. So it wasn't as easy just to say, I'm going to go slaughter this guy regardless if he's got lightning or not. There's other crap at play too.
Well, and to bring it back to what Luke was saying, you know, if you want to talk about the Palpatine Anakin relationship, I mean, as you see in this novel, the one thing that was on Anakin's mind this entire time was Padme.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one of the fascinating things that this novel did is it kind of built up how Anakin started to get that distrust in Padme, and it happened a lot more slowly in the book than it did in the movie, because I feel like in the movie it's, you know, all of a sudden he's like suspicious of Obi-Wan, and why are Obi-Wan and Padme on Mustafar?
Yeah, I did not like that in the movie. It was too choppy and it's what made Anakin seem so, yes, he was emotional, but like we're going from night to day in like a scene. And it's like, bro, like it wasn't executed well. And I think in a story so complex, you're dealing with love and power and betrayal. It's like, you gotta play that out. This should have been a 4-hour movie. Dugan.
Oh no. And I think, honestly, like one way that you could have added more to the distrust would have been to add kind of like, what is it, like the petition of the 2000. I think the movie really did miss a lot of like the political aspects.
Yes.
Of it. I like the movie a lot as well. Like I'm with Luke. Like it's definitely like on my top as well. But that part was missing, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. And one thing in the book that I found interesting, or at least not interesting, just is how Bail Organa like made a reference that Padme was a better senator than he was. And then honestly, like kind of like in the movies do a disservice to Padme, and they do not make her seem as if she was such a leader, and how she pulled Bail back from like objecting to after Palpatine, because he wanted to do something, and she wouldn't allow him to make that motion. So yeah, no, that I think that would have been another great thing to definitely add. But yeah, no, I'm definitely with Luke and Holly too. I think that part of the book was probably the most powerful. Like made me think. It just makes you think a lot more, and I love Anakin, and it makes you feel bad for Anakin. Like it makes me like think like. Even there's been a total of 3 movies in my life that have like given me nightmares, and it was My Girl, when the poor kid gets stung with all the bees.
Oh,
that's
God.
awful. Yes. But then frickin' Voldemort, and then like Anakin burning.
Yeah.
And it's just is so hard to get out of your mind.
Yeah.
And then just to realize him stuck in that, because he's just a stump. You know, like it's not even, it's his head. And I mean, he's not even. Yeah,
absolutely.
And just how horrible that must be every single day, realizing you killed Padme.
Also, what I did not like that this novel did is when it described Palpatine's ship getting to Mustafar, and it like describes him as like tenderly lifting Anakin's body onto the cooler surface. I don't know, that just made my skin crawl, like thinking about like Andy described him perfectly as a stump, and I I just like envisioned that in my mind, and then seeing the word tenderly in there, I was not.
And just
fan.
I don't know, the way you're describing it, it's just like joy. It was just like an added bonus, like what had happened to Anakin. And he's so powerful. I know he'll still be useful, so we'll throw some limbs on him, and he's still gonna do my bidding. But like, it's just, man, that is a physical reminder. And that's why it's so surprising in the Vader comic that we're reading right now. He's like, do you not remember Mustafar and what happened? Like, you have physical reminders every day of what happened, and that's why I'm really curious to see how that story is going to be ending, because it seems pretty obvious that you did it, my man, and then like you're in a body of armor now because of everything that happened. And so, can we talk about what was it? Was it Yoda or Qui-Gon explaining that love was an important part of like what the Jedi Order should have been? What was that, Holly? You were explaining that to me. Am I making that up? Maybe I was imagining that.
You might have been.
That might have been a dream.
I was gonna circle back to something that Nettie and Dugan both brought up, which was about Padme, because this is something that really bothers me a lot. Is this portrayal of women who are supposed to be leaders and strong female characters in these novels, but then they're like overrun by their love for these men that they just die for. And I get it's supposed to push the story forward, but can't we do that without killing off all these women who are like awesome role models for other women? And also, Padme is like a badass leader. She's a badass senator. She is a badass politician. She is a badass diplomat. She did not deserve what happened to her. Yeah. And for her to like, in this novel, there was one line in the novel where they were like, this is Padme. She's a senator and she's an awesome politician. And they're like listing all the things that she is. And then they're like, but more than that, she's Anakin Skywalker's wife. And I was like, And then they're like, and even more than that, she is the mother of his child. Yeah. And I was like, we've just like reduced one of the most badass females in the Star Wars galaxy, in my opinion, to just being the mother of some man's child. Holly
is an unfortunate reality in our everyday life. So it is unfortunate, and it's something that needs to be corrected. Yeah, Rob.
I gotta say, I'm happy Paige isn't here, because if she was here and she just heard you say that, she would be. She'd be all in on that, because you just described it perfectly about the way Star Wars kills female characters.
Yeah, and I think even the books that they're writing now about Padme are awesome, but it shows here, like in this book, that there was a lot of good stuff there to begin with, and then we're picking up off of that. But it is an unfortunate way that she had to pass. How would you? She would have had to have passed at some point. I mean, it serves the Star Wars story as it was written in the 70s, but it could have been done in a better way. I completely agree.
I'm just saying that she had so much love for what she thought was this one child that she was going to have, and then she dies from a broken heart. She literally has this child. She dies from a broken heart.
It's a timing thing, Holly. She's got to have the kids, but like you can't have her have the kids and then Anakin kills her, then he knows they're the kids. Like it's a timing thing. It's not great. It's not great. It's the weakest part of the prequels. Jory?
No, actually, I was going to kind of echo what you're just saying, Mike. It seems like she has to die in a way like that, because and I 100% agree with you, Holly. Like, I 100% agree with you. It just sucks that she has to die in a way like that because of, do you have Anakin kill her prior to the children being born, and then they're like almost cutting out, children out of
I would have
body.
preferred that.
But you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like how do you get to the point of like Anakin doesn't know about the children, but she still has the children, and then she obviously has to pass away at some point, and it's almost like it's really like story convenience as to why she dies the way she does, because you could have had Anakin kill her, but in the same, then you're coming to a point of like, they're essentially cutting out children out of her body to then take out into the world, and it's just it's kind of ugly either way, whichever way you want to go with it. But no, I 100% agree with you, Holly. Like the fact of her just dying as she's a badass woman and then just dying of a broken heart, it sucks. But how else do you do it without everything else in the story kind of lining up? Maybe somebody else has something else that kind of looks like Luke might have a solution to it.
The midichlorians, Luke?
Just listening to everybody talk, I had this like brilliant idea for a story they could have done if it was this Disney era, what I think they would have done with Padme. George wrote himself into a corner in the early 70s when he decided both of Luke's parents were dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then he retconned it so no, his dad isn't dead in the second movie. And then he goes and introduces the mother character in the prequels. And I think I'd agree that it is a failure. The story of how she dies isn't good enough. It's just not. It's not good enough. And I'm thinking if they would have done it in the modern era, she would have lived, snuck away with the kids, and then we would have got like a Disney Plus series in which she makes a sacrifice along the way to save them, and that kills her.
Yeah.
And then I'm not a woman, but I would think more palatable as a woman to see a story about her making a sacrifice to save her children rather than the sort of broken heart narrative. So that to me, it's my wheels spinning, hearing everyone kind of talk about this stuff. In a different era, could have turned out differently. But George, I think, was like, after the prequels, I'm done. This is it. This is Star Wars. So I just have to tie this bow up in 2 hours. And that part of it fell short.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many ways that he could have done it differently. You can literally just have her die from complications in childbirth. That was literally what Anakin saw in his dream, and they didn't even do that. They were like, you know what? She talks about how much she loves these kids, and she's a very powerful character, but
she's got a collapsed trachea. Like she can't,
right.
You can't have a kid when you're just choked.
It could have been that simple, not simple, but if she had to die in that moment, then it could have literally just been from, they even had a conversation earlier on in the novel when she was like, we're on Coruscant, we're not on like Tatooine where there's not a lot of healthcare.
Yeah.
And I just feel like this is just my opinion. This is the last thing I'll say about it tonight. As a woman who loves Star Wars, I'm very sick of seeing women die like this in Star Wars. It doesn't make me feel very hopeful. Yeah. And Star Wars is supposed to be a story of hope, and I kind of feel like it's just a story of hope for men and for women. It's just like, sucks to be you.
It's almost as if George thought that it's going to be somewhat, just another tragedy of Anakin, that you rejected this person and she died of a broken heart, and that makes it even more traumatic. But I'm just going to show you Vader, rising on this machine, and everyone's just going to be so blown away by that scene that they'll kind of let that as a pass of just, she died of a broken heart, but that's Vader. That's cool. It's just, it felt cheap, and it definitely did. And it's one of those things that it's unfortunate, and I get that we're trying to correct those things now in Star Wars. It's hard to look past that, but it's awesome that you're getting a lot more credit here for Padme and showing that she had a lot of genius strategy going on and preserving what she believed in even after her death, and it's playing out that way. And I think it's almost like her legacy is living on, and I think that's really cool, and hopefully making it right. But 2005 wasn't that different of a time, you know what I'm saying? We could have made things a little more right. It just, like Luke said, I think he's like, think about the shit that George Lucas had heard over the past 5-6 years about his prequels, right? He's like, can we just wrap this thing up, and this is fine. Let's get it out, and then it'll make, billions of dollars, whatever. It just felt like it wasn't that important to him, even though he made an entire trilogy about Padme. As much as it's Anakin's story, it's their love story, and for it to end like that, it definitely kind of shows you where George's headspace was. Like, this is good enough, and and maybe that is to him. Maybe it was very romantic and tragic, but he's also not a woman. So he is, probably just a simple-minded man, which most of us are. And simple is not a great thing. So, but yeah. Feels awkward to transition out of that, Holly. Is there is there something else?
I
A whole panel full
up.
of men, and I feel terrible, but
No, we can transition out of that. Look, seriously, the women are literally sacrificed all the time. We can go back. We can talk about this, how, and this is a little EU here, how Leia and Luke were twins and how Jaina and Jason were twins. And how at one point Jaina was and did take out Darth Caedus. So that's the one time maybe that a female, I mean, there's other times, but a female character takes over. But we all know that Jaina and Fel lead to Cade, like I said, who is literally the most powerful Jedi and Sith of all damn time, as we have said multiple times. And he actually takes a Sith as his kind of apprentice and lover, and he kills her. Why? And it all starts from the whole bloodline going on. And there's so much hurt and there's so much things going on. But if there's really just, you guys just want to just say it, it's what we said on many casual councils, what I just said, that the women always further the males. But, and there's a lot of people that actually think that Jason Solo, I've even seen discussions, what if Jaina Solo would have been the one that turned bad? Okay, the Sword of the Jedi. Yeah. But it ultimately leads to Cade, and it leads to Cade still slapping down the women.
Yeah, the EU is a little more open-minded. I mean, Luke was, into a machine at one point, so it was a weird time. A little more open-minded there in the EU. Some interesting things going on. But
I kept cutting Jory off. Jory.
No, you're good. I agree. Like, women in Star Wars really do just kind of get put on the back burner, and even in new canon, with Leia, like pretty much like giving up her own Jedi path because she knew that it would, lead to the destruction of her son. Mm-hmm. Once her actual her training was complete, it would lead to the destruction of her son. It's almost like a way of like kind of taking back from what the women can do in Star Wars, and and it really just, it sucks. It sucks for the women. And I had a rebuttal to your Padme, and maybe with George Lucas and how he was writing, but honestly, at this point, I kind of forgot with everything that's been said. So, no, I had a good rebuttal, and maybe it was just at the time just convenience for him, but I lost it at this point. So,
yeah, I will say this: I do want to do another episode of just like obviously not in book club. And we could transition back into talking about the Revenge of the Sith. But for anyone listening who's interested, I do want to do an episode where we talk about kind of the treatment of women in Star Wars, and kind of what that means, and kind of, I don't know, maybe get more of the female perspective. I feel like there are a lot of male Star Wars fans, and I think that the majority of our listeners are male, but I know there's also a lot of really awesome women who run a lot of Star Wars podcasts that kind of give a different perspective, and I feel like there's not as much respect for a lot of them as there are for some of the other podcasts. And I feel like typically, I mean, we get characters like Rey who, Disney said, let's make this female character who doesn't have to make those kinds of sacrifices to like further her story. And she gets a lot of like, oh, she's just a Mary Sue and she's so boring. And
hey, but Cara Dune grunts a couple times, and
that's
boy,
right.
Best female character
oh
in Star Wars.
But she is a Mary Sue.
Yeah, so it's undeniable that is a problem in Star Wars, and the simple reaction of many fanboys and being upset by the discussion and also the female character leads, it speaks for itself. It is undeniable. It is a problem. It needs to be addressed, and it is a big problem.
Yes, I will say definitely not talking about
Are
the
we?
Revenge of the Sith novel now, but I was wearing a Star Wars shirt at the mall one time, and some guy literally asked me if my boyfriend got me into Star
Yeah.
Wars.
And you're like, well, funny story. Yeah, but
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
So it's real, but
It is. That's unfortunate.
what do you do?
Anything else about Revenge of the Sith? I hate transitioning like that, but is there anything else that we missed, Holly? Any big notes? Any?
Yeah, Jory?
I just thought the one last cool point, and this is kind of going just randomly off topic, but Mace's shatter point.
Yeah.
We kind of get a little bit of backstory into that, and it's not as well as I don't remember what novel that's really spoken about, but we get a little backstory into his shatter point and how it's used in the main series, and like how he sees the fault lines. And I thought that was really cool. You know, he sees different fault lines and things, and how Anakin's, you know, always in his eye, and he didn't quite understand why Anakin was always in his perspective of his shatter point, and then he really gets it at the end. Like, he is the ultimate shatter point, and this is like right before his turn to Darth Vader, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then I really thought that Mace's portrayal in this kind of gives shed some light as to why he was the way he was. You know, he felt just so much pressure, like that, and I feel like it really was in the Jedi Council. Like, he was Yoda's number 2, and so he almost tried to take some of that pressure from Yoda onto himself. And I think that's why he was always such a dick. Like, you know, like he just, like, he felt just like, I need to be there for this council because of my gifts and what I am able to see. And it just, I thought it gave a pretty cool, brief background into, you know, what his gifts were and how it affected a lot of the decisions that the council made, right or wrong. You know, obviously, I think all of us agree that the council didn't always do what was right for the time, but you know, he was depending on this power that he was a master of, but you know, he maybe didn't quite understand what the Force wanted him to see in these certain moments. And you know, it's just pressure that I don't think any of us can really relate to. But it's just something that it was pretty cool to see the background of it.
Well, Jory, that's a leap. I mean, I think I myself have probably experienced some of those pressures, but no, I'm just kidding. But you're absolutely right. Especially you got the shroud of the dark side clouding everything, right? Even Yoda doesn't understand what's going on. But from my understanding, what you're saying, Mace he's getting some signal from the Force. He just can't quite, like you said, make out what it is necessarily trying to relay to him, but it is breaking through, and it's just that ultimate manipulation from Palpatine. He's just playing everybody, but it's that crack, it's that fracture that's trying to make its way through, and he just can't identify it.
Doesn't make him likable.
I think that's valid. I think that also it was interesting to get his perspective when Anakin, you know, he's going to arrest Palpatine and really execute him, and Anakin's like, don't, like, I need him alive to save Padme. And then when Palpatine is, you know, using the Force lightning against Mace Windu, in the back of his mind he's like, Padme, why Padme? And then that's where they're like, Mace realizes that he was so focused on Palpatine's shatter point that he missed what Anakin's would have been, which was that attachment.
Yeah.
But
it's
also
a very sad moment.
It really is. And then also, interestingly enough, I liked in this novel where they talked about Mace had his flaws. He also had an attachment issue. It just wasn't to an actual like being. It was his love for the Republic.
At least it wasn't a machine like Luke Skywalker. Love Luke. That was weird though. He also said he fell forever. That was just such a sad freaking ending to him. But then even Anakin kneels down in the rain. He's like, what have I done? It's like just so much regret. And then Mace was falling forever. And it's almost like he's going to now, just like Yoda will always now understand his own failures and where he went wrong. And now Mace falling forever, it feels, is now going to live in regret. It's the saddest thing. It's the saddest thing.
Did you actually read it, Mike? It sounds like you read it.
I had my own audio book here that I didn't have to pay for, so it was a great read. Holly picked out the high points for me, which I really appreciate, because it would take me a while to get through a 400-page book, to be honest.
I think that I realized that Luke and I could do the dramatic readings on the podcast.
And I can just sit there. That's fantastic. Actually, I think Lucasfilm would probably come after us if you just did their dramatic readings on the podcast.
I've listened to the 13-hour podcast. I'm down.
See, we have one listener.
We're down.
Fine. Guys,
I mean, it's awesome.
Rob would listen.
Rob would listen.
I would listen. I would drive for like 2 weeks listening to y'all talk. I swear.
He would go from Erie to Buffalo about 30 times.
Let's go.
I was already there today. I had another burger.
So, something I did, this is like the last point. I didn't make a note of it, but in my mind I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. I was like reading through the part in the novel where I think that Obi-Wan and Yoda are trying to like sneak out or sneak in, and they get found out by that squad, the squad of clones, or I think they're clones when they're trying to sneak out. But Yoda is like disguised as they think he's a baby. And when I was reading that, I like misread it, and I thought they were talking about an actual baby that was Yoda, but not actual Yoda, like the child. And I like stopped reading. I was like, Michael, why is nobody talking about this? This book has been out since 2005. And then I realized that it actually was Yoda, because they're like, I think he's a Jedi. And they're like, what makes you think that? And then Yoda's like, whatever he says, the lightsaber gave it away.
Yeah. Well, John Favreau and Filoni were probably reading this too, and they're like, you know what? We could go with that.
Let's have
we could make an entire show dedicated to a baby Yoda. Let's do it. Okay, great. Done. There's so much in this book that they've taken and ran with.
I know. I like read that and I was like, why is nobody talking about this?
Yeah, you did. You had a moment. We had to bring you back down.
Just me.
Just a mistaken identity. Boy, this was, I think, the longest book club. Rightfully so. Long book, long discussion. A lot more folks here than I thought we were going to have. But, Jory, one last thing.
No, just one last thing. I just want to give a shout out to Brent. Just still holding it down on the Facebook group. While we're podcasting, he can't be around for it because he didn't read the book, but he's still just posting memes in there and just killing it in the book club. So shout out to Brent for and his stuff he's doing right now with the sausage quotes. It's just it's freaking amazing. So if anybody hasn't seen that, go to the book club, or go to not the book club. Sorry, go to the Facebook group, and Brent's killing it in there.
Yeah.
His editing skills are on the rise. And I think at one point we mentioned that, dark side users are all arrogant. And by no means were we referring to Brent or Wade or any of those that associate with the dark side. Definitely not arrogant individuals there. I know that they just enjoy the cool robes and the red sabers, but they're all actually the nicest people that you'll ever meet. I do not think that they're conspiring to take over the galaxy, Holly. Though there's a lot of story that remains to be told about all those guys, so we'll see how that pans out. We've really only known them, a little over a year, so we'll see a lot of stories that'll be told about those guys.
I know I just tooted his horn, but no, Brent is definitely trying to take over the galaxy.
Oh, he would stab you,
Brent,
and cut you in half.
Without a doubt. I don't know if you guys saw Trivia Trials, the first one, but he's kind of, but
there's no mercy.
With a sausage.
Phrasing.
Oh yeah, he's gonna bring the pan with a sausage.
Crossover.
Phrasing.
The FCC may not allow that on the airways. May have to edit that out and post, Holly. But a nice, solid, long book club with a lot of great panelists, Holly. Is it one of the best reads so far in the book club?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
But it was definitely a nice way to supplement the movie.
And so novelizations are still on the table.
Yes, I think
Okay.
we all agree that novelizations are still on the table. I think that they are fun to read. And also next time I'll be sure to watch the movie after I read the novel and
Yes.
keep that in mind.
Absolutely, Holly. 15 years, you can forget a lot after seeing a film. So, guys, I hope you appreciated this long podcast. I do bear with our deep discussion and our sweaty details, but a lot of book to digest, a lot of opinions to digest. I hope you enjoyed that. We are here every Monday in Flying Casual talking about Star Wars, nothing else. So if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening on all podcast platforms. Check it out on YouTube. Check out all these handsome fellows here and the beautiful Holly always on the YouTube. So we do post there every Monday as well. So wherever you can look, wherever you can listen, please do so. And like Jory gave a plug for the group, it's always a lot of fun there. If you don't understand when we're talking about sausage quotes, just go to the group. There's a very long thread all about it and a nice dedication pieces that Brent is working on for all of our sausage quotes. So check that out. Join the group, join the discussion. You can also check us out on Patreon with these fine fellas here and discuss every month with us books, movies, all Star Wars stories, however you want. But we do enjoy you being here. We hope you enjoyed it. And as always, may the Force be with you all.